Hello everyone, a very good afternoon. Yeah, she mentioned I completed my PhD. So I was here a couple of years back with my initial findings from my PhD. So I'm really glad today to be here to present the summary of my entire PhD. So the topic of my PhD was serious infection risks associated with the different treatments available for the management of moderate to severe psoriasis. This is a slide with the list of different treatment options available for moderate to severe psoriasis. As we see, the list is, we have so many options. Some of these are old and some of these are new. Regardlessly, almost all of these treatments act by somehow modulating the immune system, and therefore the risk of serious infection is a real concern with all of these treatments. Now, what we know about these treatments is some of the older treatments are known to have increased risk of serious infections, but what we really do not know, or limited data or limited evidence, is that regarding the newer treatments. Are these newer treatments like interleukin-17 inhibitors and 23 inhibitors, do they really have an increased risk, or are they safer compared to older treatments? We do not have much evidence on that. So that's the evidence gap I was trying to address in this PhD project. So my overall aim was to find out how safe these treatments are in terms of serious infections, with a special focus on the newer treatments, that is interleukin-17 inhibitors and interleukin-23 inhibitors. So the research question is one, but I tried to answer this question using 6 different studies, which I'm going to briefly discuss here. So this was my first study, and here I examined the risk of serious infections using data from existing literature. So basically I collected data from already published clinical trials and real world studies, and I used a method called network meta-analysis, which is quite sophisticated in the sense it can come up with risk estimates even if there is an absence of direct evidence for some comparisons. So the figure on the right you see is the network that we created in this study. The nodes with different colors are the different treatment options that we compared in this analysis, and the lines that connecting the nodes are the available evidence for the comparisons, or the thickness of the lines are proportional to the availability of evidence. So as you see, some treatments do not have direct evidence, meaning 2 drugs, for example, if 2 drugs are not connected in the network, I mean, there is no direct evidence. But there comes the network meta-analysis. It can use the indirect evidence and come up with an estimate using the indirect evidence, so that we can have an estimate for all possible pair risk comparisons. So this is what we found, and this is the forest plot from this analysis. So for the central line we see is the reference line, meaning there's no difference in the serious infection risk. So the points are the risk estimates, and the horizontal lines are the confidence intervals. So if for the non-academic audience, I just wanted to mention that point estimates and the confidence intervals, if they lie completely to the left of the reference line, meaning those drugs have lower serious infection risk. If it lies completely on the right side, meaning higher serious infection risk. So as we see, some of the treatments which are highlighted in green were found to have lower risk of serious infections compared to adalimumab. We also found infliximab, another older treatment, was found to have higher risk of serious infection compared to adalimumab. So this is one of the several possible forest plots. We actually created a very big table with the risk estimates for all possible pair risk comparisons. So what we basically found was some of the older treatments, especially infliximab and adalimumab, to have higher risk of serious infections compared to several other treatments. We also found risankizumab, which is relatively new, to have lower risk of serious infections. But we also felt that there was some lack of evidence for newer treatments, especially for interleukin 17 and 23 inhibitors. So there comes our next study. So in this study, I examined the serious infection risk with all these treatments, but this time using data from BADBIR. So BADBIR is one of the largest psoriasis databases worldwide, and this recruits people with psoriasis from across the UK and Ireland. So this is one of the richest database that we have for psoriasis. So I also used sophisticated, advanced statistical methods to generate risk estimates for all possible comparisons for all the treatments. So we included almost 19,000 patients contributing to more than 46,000 treatment episodes, which is quite large. So I just wanted to mention this incidence rate. It's 27.7 incidence rate of serious infections, 27 events per 1,000 person years, which may not be a big number, but the second incidence rate, which is almost more than double the previous one, is among the people who already had a serious infection event. So what we observed was the risk of infection was almost more than doubled in people who already had an infection. So this is another interesting finding. So we observed that even with serious infections, almost 68% of people chose to continue their treatments even after serious infections. Only 18% of people chose to discontinue, and some 10% they switched treatments from one to another, and a small 4% of people postponed their treatments. So this is a table with risk estimates for all the group-wise comparisons. I know it's quite busy, but to summarize, we did not find any significant differences when treatment groups were compared between each other. So although we found some differences when individual treatments were compared, risankizumab had a lower risk compared to a few of the other treatments. But in general, when we grouped them together and compared with each other, we did not find any difference in the serious infection risk. So deaths were also rare. The incidence was only 1.81 deaths per 1,000 person years. So this was our next study. So in this study, I examined the serious infection risk specifically on people with severe psoriasis, and the reason behind this was the treatment option called infliximab was specifically reserved for people with severe psoriasis. And to make a fair comparison, we pulled out data only on people with severe psoriasis, and we compared the serious infection risk. So this is the forest plot from this analysis. As we see here, the estimates for all the comparisons that we included in this analysis were found to have lower risk compared to infliximab. And this was not a surprise for us, because even previous studies have shown that infliximab has an increased risk of serious infections with some of the other comparators. But for the first time, we did this analysis specifically on people with severe psoriasis, and still we found the same increased risk. The incidence rate was also quite higher in this population, 60.6 compared to 27 in the previous population. So this was our next study, and here I examined the serious infection rate specifically on women. The reason behind is certolizumab, another treatment option, is preferentially given to women because of its safety profile during pregnancy. Maybe safer because it may not cross the placenta, and it's safer for the baby actually. And so I did this analysis only in young women less than or equal to 50 years of age, and I compared the serious infection risk in this population. So this is the forest plot from this analysis. interestingly, we found adalimumab and ustekinumab to have lower risk of serious infections compared to satralizumab. So previous studies did not show a difference. We feel that this may be due to, we especially found this difference when we included the longer follow-up period. So most of these previous studies have included shorter follow-up durations, but we were able to accommodate the longer follow-up durations. And all the data, for example, we included the entire follow-up duration. We didn't stop at the first serious infections like the previous studies. And maybe that's the reason why we were able to capture this difference. But still, there could be some unmeasured confounding, I should acknowledge, because we couldn't capture the entire confounding factors. There may be some factors associated with pregnancy, health-seeking behavior, and all that we couldn't capture in this analysis. So this was our next analysis. We focused children because there was limited data on children. Unfortunately, even in BADBIR, we could find only very few children recruited. So we were able to find 161 children who took systemic treatments for psoriasis. The mean age was 15 years at the time of treatment initiation. So we observed 20 children developing 24 serious infection events with an incidence rate of 31.42 per 1,000 person years, which is not a big difference from the adults, so it's quite similar. Most of the infections required hospitalization for 2 to 4 days. Few events required more than 10 days, actually. Skin infections were the most common, followed by respiratory infections. And finally, we did this risk of specific infections. Specifically, I looked at selected infections such as tuberculosis, meningitis, candidiasis, and other fungal infections, excluding candidiasis. This is because it is known that certain infections, for example, tuberculosis reactivation is associated with TNF inhibitors, and candidiasis is associated with interleukin-17 inhibitors. But what we do not have is a comprehensive evidence of including all the treatment groups, comparing which treatment group is safer or have lower risk compared to each other. We do not have. So that was our aim for this analysis. So we included all the adults population that we included in the initial primary study. TB was very rare in this population. We just observed 22 tuberculosis events corresponding to an incidence rate of 0.18. This may be even the background tuberculosis risk is very low in this population. Even meningitis, it was low in number, just 29 events, so we couldn't make a statistical inference for these two infections. Candidiasis risk, again, as expected, interleukin-17 inhibitors was found to be strongly associated. We also found TNF inhibitors to have higher risk compared to standard treatments like methotrexate and cyclosporine. When we excluded candidiasis from the fungal infections, we included all other fungal infections and compared the serious infection risk. We did not find any difference between the treatment groups. The difference is only with candidiasis. So interestingly, we found interleukin-23 inhibitors was not associated with any of the TB or meningitis. And even for candidiasis and fungal infections, they numerically had lower risk, but it was not statistically significant. So I think I put out many numbers here, but to summarize, serious infection risk was generally comparable across the treatments. Most people chose to continue their treatments even after serious infections, although some 18% discontinued and 10% switched treatments. Infliximab and satralizumab had an increased risk, but on specific populations like severe psoriasis and young women. TB and meningitis were rare, and interleukin-23 inhibitors were not attributed in any of the TB or meningitis cases, and they had lower risk for candidiasis and other fungal infections, but not significant. So I'll stop here. So I take this moment to thank my supervisors, Dr. Senazio and Professor Richard Warren and Dr. Mark Lind. They were nice people. I thank all my co-authors, and I give a big thanks to Psoriasis Association. They funded this project and made this project possible. I thank them, and I thank God for this opportunity. Thank you.